Kristin, welcome to Politics Done Right one more time. How are you doing today?
I'm ruling.
You are ruling, Kristin. You're ruling. Look, tell me a little about what's going on in the Democratic debate from the rules analyst point of view.
Well, gosh, we just went from 5 people being on the stage to 6 as of this morning. Steyer just got enough credentials that he's going to be on the stage. And I was really looking forward to just 5 because we've had way too many people on the stage to really have a meaningful conversation. So that's kind of a bummer.
Well,
but I guess some people are pretty excited that he is going to be on the stage. And there are some other people who are probably upset that they didn't get the qualifications, but they still have the rest of the day to get there.
Well, I mean, you know what? I think, believe it or not, even those that didn't make it, right? The fact that they didn't make it will give them some extra news coverage, right? They'll go out there and say, well, I didn't make it because, and the news media is going to want to have something special to cover. They're going to want to have some controversy or some excitement. So they're going to get some coverage.
Well, I think Bloomberg's doing a pretty good. He's on some show commenting on the debates right after it. I can't remember which. So
didn't know that.
He's leveraging the debates since he can't be there. Might as well comment on them. Why not? So,
well, since you have to be very middle of the road, I want to ask the first question I want to ask you is as follows. There are 2 guys that are putting a lot of money into the debate, or rather into the election to try to get themselves in the debates and elected. How should a moderator handle something of that nature? 2 candidates with unlimited capital to make themselves viable, while others having to do it the old-fashioned way. How should a moderator handle that?
Well, I mean, if that's a question that you think the American public wants answered, and obviously, Egberto, you want that answered, so you would go, ask the question. And in fact, Steyer, he was in the 4th debate and the 5th debate.
Yes.
And he was actually asked that question directly. He was asked, housing is unaffordable. Are you the best person to fix this problem? You're the lone billionaire on this stage. What's your plan for closing the income gap? So what they did is they basically say, here, we realize that you have gobs of money, and how would you fix the economy or use that money in some way? So they tie it to something that they think that the American public would care about versus just going, is it right that you're a billionaire?
Is it?
Sure. Well, is it right not to be a billionaire? I mean, you got to have some resources in order to run for president. Let's face it, $450,000 an annual salary. You're not going to get rich as the president while you're president. You're going to get rich after you're president in the book deal and the speaking. But actually being a president and running for president, you have to have, some resources, either using other people's resources or having your own.
It's kind of curious that you said $450,000 job isn't going to make you rich. Some people would think that income is an income of a rich person, don't you think? I'm just saying.
If you're the president of the United States, you've got an awful lot of expenses that you have to take care of.
True that.
And I would not expect that the American public should pay for some of those things that you should have as the head of state. So, in relative perspective, probably not a lot for the head of state to get as a quote unquote salary.
Okay.
But for the average person, absolutely, that is a lot of money. But the average person doesn't have the expenses that a head of state should probably have and incur.
Well, I think I'll give you that. Now, you pretty much took it, well, I shouldn't say took it out, but you pretty much are concerned, I think, with the way that Wolf Blitzer is going to moderate the debate. Give me your rationale behind that.
So I think Wolf Blitzer is a very seasoned, credible journalist, and he has lots and lots of experience on the debate stage. But much like Lester Holt, who had lots and lots of experience, Lester Holt has the same kind of issue in that either you are very hard and controlling, which is what a lot of the debate moderators have been. When you have 12 people on a stage, you've got to exercise some control. Or do you let it go on the other end of the spectrum, especially when you only have 2 or 3 people on the debate stage? Do you let it, kind of let the conversation unfold? And I think the American people kind of gravitate towards the discussion versus, Egberto, I'm going to ask you a question, just answer the question. And then I'm going to ask the next candidate a question, and then they're going to answer the question. I think, the challenge for these debates is asking really, really good questions that the American public cares about, and then letting the candidates talk among themselves, debating where the differences of their positions are. And early on, they weren't debating positions because they were, at a very meta view, very similar. So it's kind of boring in that, you got to get down to the detail. Well, now you're pitting people against each other, trying to clarify their positions, and that's where it can get kind of sticky.
Now, you're saying that you think it was sort of boring before because they had similar positions, but do you really think that the average American citizens really believe that Biden and Bernie had sufficiently similar positions that it still remains sort of boring?
Well, I mean, that's the challenge of the moderators, is they need to ask questions that help shape the American position. So part of it is the question. So let me give you a very specific example, Egberto. In the very first round of debates, 1A and 1B, they were on 2 separate nights, 2 different tiers. The debate moderators used a very interesting technique called the show of hands.
Oh, yes, I remember that.
Those of you who believe about something about the healthcare, raise your hand. Do you? And I think it was, should immigrants get healthcare?
Yes.
And it was kind of interesting to see the people who immediately raised their hands and other people who kind of looked around and slowly. And
that was funny.
And
yes.
It was interesting.
Yes.
And I think it's helpful for the American public to see that. And then the Democratic National Committee went, no more show of hands. We don't like that.
Oh, wait, hold on a second. Are you telling me that the Democratic committee actually stopped that practice? I didn't realize that.
So it was either CNN, who is the host, and or I haven't gotten real clear on who actually put the kibosh on it, but the informal kind of backlash that they got on that was like, no. And then the other thing that was very similar was kind of, I call it the lightning round. We're going to go down the line and you get a very short answer. So the down the line question was, if I remember correctly, was who is going to be our biggest threat that you need to be paying attention to as president, or who do we need to be reaching out to if you're president? What's the one country? What's the one partnership? And so it was like you had to name something, and it started, I think, with Andrew Yang, and he just kind of went, "What?" Because they started at the fringe ends, and he's like, "I wasn't ready for that one," and so they stopped that as well.
Yeah, I mean, it is kind of amazing. So now that we're into this debate, now we're down to 6 people. What are you expecting them to, or what do you think are going to be the issues that should be covered in detail now?
Well, I think you're starting to see a lot more questions that are, it's a statement about what's going on in the conversation, what's the policy, and then how do you plan on executing on that? here's your position. There has been some explanation of positions in the last couple of debates. Now it's going to be like, so how are you going to actually execute? How are you going to fund it? How are you going to cut across the aisles? How are you going to make this happen? Because it's great to say, we need to do X, Y, and Z, but how are you really going to do that? I think that's what the American public are really interested in is, how is that going to work? Money-wise, collaboratively, reaching across the aisle, culturally in our country, how are you going to make that happen?
Now, that is your thought that is something that they should ask. Will they ask that? Because what I found over the time, and I didn't want to start our interview this way, is that what these guys are asking have very little to do with where the people that are most affected, what they care about. If we take a look at what's afflicting America, let's look at what whoever one wants to define as the working class or whatever. A lot of these issues that they talk about, except for, let's say, Medicare for all, many of it has little effect on the people or something that they don't particularly see.
Well, and that's the complete purview of the moderators to select the questions. What questions do they want to ask? So healthcare has almost always been a line item that they're talking about. Foreign policy has almost always been a line item. Human rights, racial equality has almost always been a topic. Opioids, once.
Mm-hmm. That's my point.
The whole reason why there was this big brouhaha at the beginning about, we should have a diverse set of moderators. We need to have more women and people of color so that they can represent those people's viewpoints coming from the stage. Well, okay, so they've had women moderators at every single debate, and yet women's issues have only come up in 2 debates.
It's kind
of interesting.
Yes, it's actually very interesting, and I tell you what is also very interesting, that what's the name of the woman who is running that just dropped out of the race today? Williamson.
Did she drop out? Marianne Williamson.
She dropped out today. That was the only person that really had a cogent answer on something like reparations. So we had something that was looking to be, when we're talking about inclusivity or things that really matter to people. And the candidate most people consider a fringe candidate was the candidate with an actual valid answer.
But it was only asked really, I think the reparations issue was only asked in 2 separate debates. So if you think that the audience, and each audience is comprised of a region area,
right.
So you have to ask yourself, do you talk about the issues that region cares about, or do you aim for the broader national audience? Now, I thought it was interesting that we were in Los Angeles, and nobody brought up homelessness. True. It's like, wow. How come they didn't talk about that? I would imagine if I was, and I grew up in Los Angeles, so if I'm a Los Angelian, I would probably want to hear about issues that are most important to me.
Well, I mean, and I don't know if we're kind of getting on the fringe of your purview or what you talk about on these issues, but I find that neither party, I find that when you take a look at both parties, except for those that are on, let's say, what many would call the fringes on both sides, they are pretty much milquetoast. They pretty much don't talk about much. They pretty much, even the way that the moderation is done is pretty much status quo, don't you think?
Well, keep in mind that this is a Democratic primary.
Right.
Okay. So you have basically the liberal news outlets that are providing the moderators, and they're qualified journalists and or opinion journalists. And they are going to pretty much ask questions that are going to support a viewpoint. And you don't really want a bloodbath at this point either. Like, and I do think that the Democratic candidates have kind of this gentlewomen's agreement to not like go for the throat. I think that is going to start changing. We saw it in the Republican side 4 years ago. I think you're going to see it on the Democrat side, that, the field has to get winnowed down. And one of the ways that the moderators ask the questions is they say, candidate A has been quoted of saying this, and you have been quoted as saying this. Or how are you in agreement with this person? Are you in disagreement? Where is the difference between what you believe and what your compatriot believes? And I think that you're going to see more of those kinds of questions happen.
Now, Kristin, you just said something, and my antennas just kind of zoomed up because I hear it all the time, but I don't see it. And, I didn't expect you to see it as a moderator. Do you really think the liberal, even the news media is liberal, even the ones that have been in these questioning in these debates and evaluating these candidates?
Absolutely.
Really?
So you haven't seen any Fox debate moderators because the DNC basically said we're not going to ask Fox to participate this year. That is the first time that has happened. Mm-hmm. If you take a look at the Republican national debates that happened 4 years ago, Wolf Blitzer did 2 of them, I think. Mm-hmm. So it's always been a bipartisan media kind of, everybody got a chance. This time it's really, it's CNN, it's NBC, MSNBC,
NPR.
And NPR tends to be more on the liberal side. So I haven't seen a conservative outlet sponsoring the debates.
So you do consider Fox News an outlet then, or a news outlet?
A media outlet, yes.
Okay. Okay, that's fair. That's fair. All right, next subject. What do you expect after this debate? Do you expect us to be whittled down a bit more or not?
That's a really interesting question. I think a couple of people missed the debate marks because of the polling and the holidays. I think you actually might see more people in the February debates, but there are 3 debates in February. Mm-hmm. 3.
But you already mentioned in your promo that, my God, these things are falling off. People are no longer watching the debates, right?
Correct. Yep. So this is going to be an interesting challenge about how can the debate moderators structure something that is actually going to be of interest. There are more people who watch town halls than watch the debates.
But I think town halls are better venues anyway, right? Because you get a chance to really feel a candidate out, sort of on screen from the strong hands of the moderator, right?
It's a one-on-one. It's a up close and personal, and I think that the American voter generically wants to know who they're voting for. Like, I want to know who you are and whether I believe you, I trust you, I understand your positions, which is why there have been a couple of questions on the debate stage that are what I call the human interest questions. Mm-hmm. These are the ones that say, if you were president, what would you do? Or, what is it that do you want to ask for forgiveness of? That was a weird one.
That one proved something. That's a weird question, but it proved something that I think this country needs to examine deeply. And I think the answers that the 2 women gave, and you can correct me if you think I'm wrong, being a woman yourself, but I think the way those women answered that question is directly related to us as Americans having not fully elected Hillary Clinton, having us not ever having elected a woman as a president, when even a Pakistan and an India and all these countries that we consider not very pro-women, they've all had women. So what do you think about that?
Well, I don't actually remember what the question was, but it was the women basically said, I would ask for forgiveness, and the men all said, and I can't remember, but for me it was more of I didn't come to that conclusion there, Berto. I just was like, wow, isn't that interesting? The women asked for forgiveness, and the men were. I mean, I just thought it was an interesting differentiator between the men on the stage and the women on the stage.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah. I took it. The reason I took it is, I'm from somewhere else originally. I'm a naturalized American citizen, and as such, I kind of look at things from a very I think more so than most, I can look at it from an elevated level, if you will, from looking at it from 50,000 feet, if you will. And it is always surprising that as an advanced a country that we are, that is, even if in our debates, I kind of see the differences between the female moderators moderate as opposed to the male moderators. I just see a dynamic there that is sometimes worrisome. Don't you see it even within the moderators? Oh,
yeah. In fact, I had somebody who asked about the different styles, which I thought was kind of interesting, between the men and the women. And, the way that women even intervene when somebody has gone over. There's usually a please or a, thank you, or whereas the men are a little bit more brusque.
Right.
The women are a little bit, and I'm generalizing here. I have not actually gone through the data to look at it. My data analyst and I were thinking about doing that, but it's like the women tend to be a little bit more patient and let the people go over time a little bit more. I don't know if people are aware that there are, for most of the debates, and I can't confirm this for all of them, but there usually is a shot clock that says green, it's go, yellow is you have
a few seconds,
and red is you're out of time. You need to wrap it up. And so the idea is that they're all gentlemen and gentlewomen up there, and you are going to wrap it up when you start seeing that yellow light. And that does not happen a lot. The only person who actually, this is really interesting, the only person who actually really follows those time limits the closest, who do you think that is, Egberto?
Joe Biden.
Nope.
Okay, don't tell me Klobuchar.
Nope.
It's definitely not Warren, so please don't tell me it's Bernie.
Nope.
I'm lost.
Andrew Yang.
Oh, wow.
Yeah.
Discipline.
Yeah.
Discipline.
He probably follows the elements the closest. If I look at the data, he rarely goes over time. He's right spot on. It's really quite amazing.
And to our listeners, you need to go to rulesanalyst.com. Kristin analyzes a whole lot of how long people speak for, all that kind of stuff. It's worth a look at, because when you're watching it in real time, you don't see these things. But she goes down there with her team and she does quite a bit of analysis on that. Good work, Kristin, on that in that domain, that is.
Thank you.
But anyhow, let's kind of wrap this up by you telling me what's going to happen in the CNN debate.
Well, I think it's going to be pretty spicy. I think Wolf Blitzer, if I had to look in my crystal ball, I think that he's going to stir the pot. And I think that he's going to pit candidate against candidate. I think that he's going to provide some leading questions that people will have to push back on a bit. I think he's going to say some things that just might make you kind of go, where's that coming from? Looking for questions that the candidates have not prepared for. So I think it could be kind of interesting. I hope that that he brings a little pizzazz to the table, that he sparks a little fire. He's got to do something because as you mentioned before, the ratings have been going down a little bit. But it's hard to incite some interest when you got 12 people on a stage. So now that we've got 6, maybe there might be an opportunity for some real debating to go on.
That would be fun, but I sure wish we had Yang out there because I want to discuss UBI and I want to discuss, I want to discuss interesting dynamics from all sides of the ideological divide, and not having Andrew Yang in there doesn't present itself to bring up that other thing.
He's got 10 more hours.
You think he's going to do it? No.
Who's to know?
All right. Kristin Arnold, president of QPC Inc., rules analyst for 2019-2020 presidential debates, high stakes meeting facilitator, professional panel moderator, and award-winning author, past president of the National Speakers Association. Thank you so kindly for having been with Politics Done Right, and thank you so kindly for coming on with us on this notice, my friend.
Thank you, Egberto.